Hello everyone, and welcome back to the final episode of this Living Souls series, a collection of whiskies that have vastly impressed me in many different ways. Today we are talking about this rather pretty looking thing, which is a 15-year-old blended whiskey. This is coming in at 46% ABV, and it's from a Solera system. This is from their own Solera system too. For those of you that don't know what a Solera system is, I suppose it can be done slightly differently from what is done, the way it's done in sherry. But typically, if you imagine a little pyramid of casks, that's not a pyramid, that's a very small pyramid. You've got one barrel at the top, and then two, and then three, and then four, and then five, however kind of deep you want it to go. And you're constantly moving liquids through them. So by the time you bottle it off on the last one, you've got a liquid that's been through loads of different wood types, loads of different barrels that have held things for different lengths of time. In Scottish whisky, mainly with things like Glenfiddich 15 or the Lochfine Living Cask or Balvenie Tun, you essentially have a large vatting unit. It's a little bit too big to be called a barrel, but it's typically called a tun, or you can call it a Solera vat or a living cask in Lochfine's sense. And you are filling it up, letting all that stuff marry together until you like the taste of it, bottling off a few or a lot of bottles in Glenfiddich's case, and then refilling that up with loads of stuff. The Glenfiddich 15, for example, we know it's kind of a hidden sherry bomb, that thing, especially for the price point. But there's virgin oak in there, there's like refill American oak of different degrees in there. So essentially, it's an eternal, constant thing, which is what this is. So I would expect many batches after this. This comes in at about £50 a bottle. In fact, I think most retailers before delivery have it for less than £50. Big focus on sherry. It doesn't typically state sherry in general, but from this little note here, there's probably, based on the smell of it, quite a lot of sherry involved in this Solera system. So let's smell, taste, and then score. Right. For those of you that may not have watched the other three videos, I haven't tried these before. This is like a totally going in blind blank canvas situation. This just smells like red grapes and cherries, and then like tapas meat. There's an incredible tapas, well, Spanish restaurant in Manchester called El Gato Negro, and they serve these little like chipolata Spanish style sausages in cider vinegar. That smells like this. The red grape thing just reminds me of Schlur, I think it's called. It's like a fizzy red grape soda. And then there's a cherry note. There's actually a similar note in this to what was in the 19-year-old, especially when I went back to it. It's like a cherry Bakewell note. It's like pastry, almonds, frangipane, little glacier cherries, kind of amaretto-like. Why do they, honestly, why do they taste and smell so good across the whole thing? Like the lowest score one of these has got so far is an 8.5. I think the 40 got 8.5, the 19 was a 9.5, the 18 was an 8.5. And this thing is lining up to be a pretty big score too. Well, isn't that delightful? And then when you go back to it, it just smells like really good raisiny sherry. Must admit, for those of you that have been following this channel for a long time, you know I fall in and out of love with sherry, or sherry cask whiskies quite a lot. Sometimes they're my favourite, sometimes they're not my favourite. Although I will say there is a big contender for Whisky of the Year, which is a big old sherry cask whisky from this year. But this doesn't have for me a lot of the downside of sherry, which is overly sweet and masks a lot of like character of the spirits that are within it. Now I don't know what's in this, I don't know what the blend is made up of. Sorry, very chesty all of a sudden. But it's not too sweet, and I'm still getting those nice bright kind of cider vinegar notes. There's like a finish to it that is very reminiscent of when you've eaten too many like Haribo sweets and your tongue goes like a little dry. And then going back into the smell of it, it just smells like cherry bakewell and cranberry juice. Big cranberry note coming off that as well. Snoring dog. That might be the first time I've ever smelt cranberry on a whiskey before. I suppose it is Christmas time. I think this video comes out the week before Christmas. And then Whiskey Wednesday is actually Christmas Day this year. So that video probably won't get a lot of views. Might make that the Whiskey of the Year video. We'll see. I think this is one of the most brilliant examples of a digestif whiskey. No, not digestif, aperitif, sorry. Digestif is before the meal, aperitif is after the meal. Is that right? It's been a long day. This is a perfect after dinner whiskey. Or to pair with something like, I think if you paired this with like a little chocolate tart or something, I think this would be incredible. There's notes of almonds and red grape. There's little cherry notes to it as well. Well, there's another bottle of whiskey I've got to buy. I will say, as brilliant as the smell is on this, and I do really like the finish, the palate, you've got this big spike on the smell, the palate is a little bit flatter and you've got this beautiful kind of descending curve of a finish. But it's one of the cleanest, tastiest whiskies I've had for quite a long time. And for sub £50 a bottle, I don't think there's much to contend with that, if I'm being honest with you. I think I've found my two Christmas presents to myself, and one is this 15-year-old and the other one is the 19-year-old. I'll probably be buying both of those at the end of this tasting session. But I'm going to give this 15 and 9. And I know I said the palate was a little bit mid and doesn't do much, but I think for the depth and the transportation that this thing takes you on, to talk about the word Solera, this takes me to like a little villa in Spain or a little Spanish restaurant, and all of the smells of all of the mains and the tapas and the dessert and glasses of sherry and like toasted almonds and cherries and some of my favourite flavours in the world. So this one is a little bit biased as a score, but I'm going to give this a 9. I think this is incredible stuff, especially for the money. You talk about blended whiskey and blended malt whiskies and how they're becoming more popular, but there's still a slight sort of antagonist view of them in some capacities. If I poured that for you, you'd probably say it was a single malt whiskey. 100%. I've never really done brand of the year or distillery of the year. That's not really a thing I've done in the past. And these boys and girls aren't a distillery. But in terms of product of the year, I can't think of a brand I've tried where all 4 whiskies have genuinely impressed me this much. So yeah, 15-year-old blended Solera system bottle from Living Souls gets a 9 out of 10. Thank you all very much for watching. I have no idea what next week's video will be, but I'll see you then. And if I don't see you beforehand, Merry Christmas, but I'll definitely see you before New Year. Thank you.